We're halfway through Loki Season 2 now, and this episode did a lot to catapult the story forward. After the way the last episode ended, I assumed coming in that it would focus a lot on Renslayer and what she's been up to, and we get that and even more. We start off in 1868 Chicago, where we find out what Miss Minutes and Renslayer have been up to. It was a bit confusing initially on how this lined up with everything else we've been seeing happen, but I did like how it gradually gave us the details. There wasn't a big exposition dump when the two characters met up. We got to slowly see what their plan was and how it was meant to play out. It turns out He Who Remains had a plan for whenever he should die. Have someone drop off the TVA manual to an alternate version of himself. The way the TVA manual is used in this episode, and how its role seems to be consistently growing each episode, I think there's definitely more to OB than has been let on. Between knowing all of the secrets of the TVA, and his book being used to essentially create King, since that is where he learned so much of his information from, I think OB is close to the same level as Renslayer. Renslayer gives the manual to a variant of King, and even though we could assume that Miss Minutes' absence probably had something to do with He Who Remains' death, and sorting all of that out, it was exciting to finally see the story expand beyond Loki and get some development in King's story. We don't know exactly how this phase of Marvel is going to pan out, but we know that some version of King ends up being the big villain, so it's always nice to return to that character and get some development there. The episode then jumps back to the TVA, and one of the questions I had after last episode was whether or not the loom was still going to be a problem with all of the branches bombed. This was one of those things that I would have believed if it went either way, but I liked the way it incorporated into the story here by needing to find Miss Minutes, and then eventually just going after the variant with the same temporal aura as He Who Remains. Loki and Mobius visit Chicago during the World's Fair, and the banter between the two of them worked for me as they walked around looking for clues. Nothing stood out, but it was a nice way to slow down and focus on the characters for a bit, rather than the large conflicts. They get a bit of a clue when they hear a story about a ghost clock haunting Midway, and even though it felt silly at times, I enjoyed the way Miss Minutes was used in the past. For the most part, she's kept out of sight, stuffed in a bag, which makes sense. Her growing into a gigantic ghost clock was on the sillier side, but it made enough logical sense in the story for me to accept it, and thankfully it wasn't something that was dragged on. It was included with a purpose to let Renslayer and Victor Timely escape, but her scaring the people away wasn't the main focus of that scene for more than a few seconds. While Loki and Mobius are looking around, they come across an Asgardian diorama, and we get a mention of Balder the Brave, a prominent character from the comics who has yet to appear in the MCU. I may have taken this wrong, but this scene made it feel like to me that Loki was starting to finally miss his family and the normal life that he had before being sent to the TVA. He's found a purpose here, and he's met all of these different people, but we've still seen our version of Loki in the MCU have these deep ties to his family, even if they don't always get along. Loki and Mobius eventually find Renslayer at a presentation done by Victor Timely, a variant of He Who Remains, where he shows off the first iteration of the temporal loom, which conveniently fixes their problem in the TVA. Overall, I think the episode did a very good job of making this feel like the 1800s. Between the set design, the whimsical music during the action, it all really sold me on the era. But this one scene of Timely's introduction to the audience really captivated me. The tone, the speech, the aesthetic, I honestly stopped taking any notes for my review for a solid 10 minutes because I was just entranced by the episode. After his presentation, he gets swarmed by all sorts of people wanting to either have the new invention or complaining about past purchases, and this is where we start to learn about Timely as a person as he does a few walk and talks with various groups. We see how much of a genius he's capable of being, but he's limited by the resources of his time. He still has the same intellect and aura where we can believe he's a variant of He Who Remains, other than being played by the same actor of course, but he's still different enough where they can be differentiated. The pacing really picks up here as everyone tries to fight for control of him, Renslayer and Loki both trying to make their cases to him, and then Sylvie arrives in the mix as well to kill him. The moment very much mirrored the finale. The angst coming off of her is a bit much so far. She just seems so dead focused on killing this man and every other variant of him, which is understandable because we learned what she's been through last season, when she was introduced because of him in the TVA. But with this being such a long time ago, it's hard to remember sometimes her motivation behind this, and it just comes off as a narrow-minded, psychotic killer. I did like though how by the end of the episode, she was able to calm herself down enough and realize that even if Timely is a variant of He Who Remains, and has a chance to go on and do the same horrible things, he's a different person right now who has the potential to be better. Even though I doubt it right now, this may be a turning point for her character, because we know she starts working with Loki again as the season goes on. I still think we're going to see that moment in the TVA where Sylvie finds past Loki from her point of view. Eventually, Renslayer and Timely are able to escape and hide away, and even though the pacing slowed down a bit, it really felt like the story was full steam ahead for the rest of the episode. So much was happening as the characters got to meet each other that it never felt like there was a break to relax. Timely gets everything finally explained to him in a comprehensible manner, and this was where the episode to me started to look to the future. I don't know how many, if any, other variants of King we'll see this season, but Timely learning everything about his future in the TVA, and then going back with Loki and Mobius to fix the loom, makes it feel like he's going to be a big player for the rest of the second season. The scenes on the boat would not have been something I would describe as necessary, but it was a good way of shifting the focus to Miss Minutes and Renslayer, for us to see what they want out of this. We already knew that they both want the power that comes with being his right-hand man, but that means two very different things for them. After Timely expresses a bit of interest in Renslayer, she shows that what she wants is strictly professional, describing it only as a partnership, which gets her dropped into the water. Miss Minutes, on the other hand, might as well have been fuming with jealousy as Timely made a flower for Renslayer. She was almost always out of focus in the background of these scenes, but I appreciated the attention to detail to still animate and give her reactions, which showed a lot about the character. We didn't dive too much into Miss Minutes in the first season, but she goes full wacko here, convincing Timely to abandon Renslayer, and then obsessing over her love of him to the point where she wants her own body to be with him. And I think most people would have had a similar reaction to Timely, if they had an AI that an alternate version of themselves supposedly created starts confessing love, freak out and put her back in the box. But in the end, both Miss Minutes and Renslayer are left together at the end of time, rather than with Timely. This episode did a lot to interest me in their characters, and I hope we get to learn more about who they are as the story progresses. The episode also ended on a bit of a cliffhanger, as Miss Minutes teases a secret that will make Renslayer angry. I really have no guess as to what this could be, but my initial thought was something to do with a familial or romantic relationship between Renslayer and King, because if I'm correct, there was something between them in the comics, and the voice recording from the first episode revealed that they worked together during the multiversal war. What did you think of this episode of Loki? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like the video, and subscribe for coverage of Loki as a new episode premieres every week. And remember to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you all for watching, and remember, the Force will be with you. Always.